Sweet surrender as I love, serve, and remember.
So, Sean Gold was 16 years old, and he went to a summer camp, and it's the first day there, and he's talking with all the guys, and they're trying to connect, so the bunch of guys came up to him, they were asking him, so tell us about your first kiss. And he said, this is like the nightmare question for me for two reasons. One is I was a total nerd. The only thing I'd ever kissed was my PSAT book. And the second reason was he was in the closet and hadn't come out and had no intention of coming out. And at this point in his life, in rural Pennsylvania. But he'd come up with a plan. He had planned for this occasion. So he said, well, I had my first kiss, but it was in Disney World. I met this great girl, and we were outside Epcot Center, and we had this amazing kiss, and it was fireworks. And he said, but you know, we've lost touch. And they're like, oh, go. So then this guy one of the kids pulls him aside and said, was her name really Sarah Brown? And he goes, yes, Sarah Brown. And he said, that's amazing because she's here. And he's like, what? He said, but I figure, Sarah Brown, it's a common name. What I didn't expect is after I had told this story, the word got around to Sarah Brown. And Sarah Brown had never kissed a boy either. And she didn't want people to ask her questions, so she just went along with it and said, yeah, we kissed. I remember that. So they come back to him, and they're like, she's here, and she wants to, you guys can hook up. And he says, suddenly all these hormonal teens are after this great hookup that's going to happen at camp. So for 6 days, he said he sort of hid in the bathroom, but finally the inevitable happened, and he came in contact with Sarah Brown. And she said, why did you tell everyone we kissed? And he said, why are you even here? He said, how? I said, I must have said the name Sarah Brown enough times that you just manifested here. And so they started chatting, and she said, well, we could, because she explained to him that she had never kissed someone, we could do it now so it wouldn't be a lie anymore. And his mind is twirling because he doesn't want to be lying, but he doesn't want to kiss her, and he doesn't know. So he's going, and finally he just says, Sarah, I just can't. And she's looking at him, and she goes, you can't. And he can see her mind swirling. Oh, you can't because of your religion? And he's like, my religion, that's it. And so he said, when you bring up Hinduism in rural Pennsylvania, people just leave it alone. And that was the end of that story. It's very hard. Well, he did say that he actually felt less lonely because he realized a lot of people put on masks because they're afraid. And it speaks to the power and the courage it takes to declare something. We're talking about the topic title today is I Declare. And when we declare something, and especially when we declare it personally, first and foremost, and then publicly, that takes a lot of courage to do that. This Saturday is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And what's interesting there's many things about interesting, but we're going to focus first on the independence part. Because we've also, for those of you who've been here, and for those of you who aren't, I'll try to catch you up really fast. We've been going through a Hindu text called the Bhagavad Gita, which takes place in a huge myth called the Mahabharata, and it's a chapter. And it's about freedom. And what Krishna is the incarnation of God, talking to Arjuna, who's a warrior. And sorry, I dated someone who's Turkish once, and every time he kept saying, I'm a warrior. And we're like, you're a worrier? So, that just came to my mind. Sorry, Arjuna's a warrior, but who doesn't want to fight anymore. It's just too exhausting. And so Krishna's saying, you can't retreat. People who retreat from life, you need to participate and get in there. And what you're fighting for, and it's all symbolic, is your freedom. That you're here, the only freedom that you can have is in God. And that you have these things, symbolically, the things he's fighting against are all those things that are keeping him in bondage, keeping him from knowing his infinite nature, keeping him from knowing this divine communion and union in this infinite love intelligence of the universe. So he needs to actively participate in setting himself free from these things that hold him in bondage so he may be free. Very similar to the Declaration of Independence. Now in the Gita, they have different ways. Krishna gives Arjuna different ways to become free, to become unified with this divine, infinite love intelligence. And last week we talked about love, the absolute, all-encompassing adoration of this divine one. This week we're looking at the path of knowing our oneness through something which we would now call mindfulness. Are most of you familiar with the name mindfulness? Do you know mindfulness? Oh, good. Okay, so because it's like a billion-dollar business now. But mindfulness comes from a long practice in both Buddhism and Hinduism, and it's what it is and what they explain in the Gita, which is thousands of years old. It's very modern, but thousands of years old. It's laid out there in the Gita. It's where you witness. You're watching yourself, but not attaching or resisting. So the idea is what keeps us in bondage is when we get really attached to something, or we definitely don't want that. I definitely want this, or I definitely don't want that. And so there's an idea that the divine presence is not attached to anyone, you can't add on to God, nor can you take away from God. So it is in this complete state of peace and unmoved by all these things that are happening in this very temporary world. So the idea of practice is the more you all have the witness and you know the witness. And the way you know it is you can sort of watch yourself right now. You're sitting in a room, you're on a computer, you're listening with your ears and you're thinking, but even the witness transcends your thinking. So you can even watch your thinking. You can watch how you're feeling. Like you're having feelings, you're having thoughts, but you're more than that. And the way you know that is if you can think about what you were doing this morning before you got here. You can know what you were thinking. You can know what you were feeling. But what is it that's knowing what you were thinking? You're not thinking it anymore. You're not feeling it anymore, but you can witness the fact that you were having those thoughts and feelings. And not only can you do that from this morning, you can do that from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago. When you're a child, you can still, sometimes people say, well, my age is old, but I still feel so young. That's because we're connected with this eternal self that is ageless and timeless, that is never touched by what's happening in the human realm. So when you as a child, you have a sense of who you were as a child, as a witness. So this is the God self within all of us that's always watching. And so that becomes a practice. So this is why mindfulness has taken on such a big energy in our world, because it allows for freedom of not being thrown by emotions, not being thrown by the things of this world. And as we're evolving in understanding mindfulness, it is also not detachment in the sense that indifference, that's more like a sociopath. Like, I don't really care what happens as long as I get what I want and I don't get moved. It's a disassociation. We're not disassociating. And this is a very important part. To everything, there's a shadow side. There's the strength and then the shadow side. The shadow side is we can become really cool. I don't have any feelings. That's not, we have there's a Buddhist thing, well, is that so? And you have no emotions or no feelings. We're evolving past that. We have emotions and feelings. We are human beings. So we start to learn to witness those feelings and experience those feelings at the same time we're witnessing it. So we want to do both, to be fully human and fully divine. The way I like to look at it, has anyone ever been to a movie where you've just ugly cried? I don't even like ugly cry because it's beautiful cry, but you're just crying your eyes out. Has anyone ever had that variant? Yeah, I mean, this thing is like, I think and what's interesting to me, and maybe as I was thinking about the various movies, they weren't really necessarily connected to my life in an obvious way. I remember the first time I really ugly cried was during Boys in the Hood. That's life was so different than mine, but it just like cut to my heart. And Shadowlands, because it reminded me of my dad. And there's always connections, and I think it's one of the great things about movies is they develop compassion. But why? Why do we feel so deeply? We can watch a story and go so deep into our emotions? Because there's another part of us that knows it's not real. That in fact, that very distancing from the story, like we're feeling the story, but we know, we're very clear, I'm watching it on a movie screen. It's not happening in my life, because sometimes when you're so in it, if you start feeling too much, you can feel like those emotions swallow you up. You become those emotions. You can't break free. You can't even see through the clouds. But when you have a distance from them, right, you can have freedom. So I love the way Diane Pollard was taking mindfulness meditation classes, and they use the word preference. It's not that you don't have attachments or resistances, but if you put it in the terms of, I prefer having this, I prefer not to have this. So you still are allowing yourself to be human and to have preferences, but not so, because it's the attachment that gets us trapped, that creates the bondage. If I don't have this, I'm going to be miserable. Or if this comes in my life, it's going to be my life is over because it's just too much. We get so wound up, so tightly wound that we are imprisoned. And so much of what Ernest Holmes talked about was, in fact, in those first 4 chapters, is about breaking free from bondage, that we're not supposed to be in bondage. So mindfulness meditation is the practice of consistently identifying ourselves with the witness while you're living life. And it doesn't have to just happen in meditation practice. There are meditation practices that do it. They can be spiritual, they can be secular. John Kabat-Zinn, Beth did a class with John Kabat-Zinn and did it with us. It was fantastic because it's inherently spiritual, because it's eternal. This witness doesn't come, it doesn't go, it's always present. It's deeply compassionate, deeply loving. So we can practice identifying with that while we're going through something difficult. We still can have our feelings, we still have our emotions, but there's always a part of us that's watching. And it's a practice. So there can be freedom that happens because I'm having those emotions, but they don't own me. I don't have to limit my whole identity to it. And sometimes it takes time. So many of you know, most of you know, that one of my main teachers is Michael Beckwith down in Los Angeles, who had a spiritual experience, but unlike most spiritual experiences, he was able to sustain that state so he can go to it pretty easily. So he can live in that vastness, but he's still very human. And that's what people get confused. They're like, well, and when I say he's in that vastness, that's not an abstract concept you actually can experience. I would say if you ever get a chance to hear him speak in person, you can feel it. And he was still human. He still gets competitive. He would get upset or angry at various things because this was the beginning of his church and he cared about it. But there was always the witness. And he doesn't talk about his human experience much. But when he does, he was talking about this sadness, and he was just noticing it when it came up around his dad. But when he started to notice that sadness wasn't leaving, that it was just sort of always there. And he said it was there for years. And it wasn't something for him to fix. He was just always aware of it. He just had this witness. And over time, by continuing to witness it without trying to fix it, without trying to judge it, because every time you try to fix, well, this is the cause or this is the cause. If sadness is just there, it keeps finding causes. But witnessing it over time, it dissipated and dissipated and dissipated. And he said, finally, after these years, it just completely disappeared. And I say that Because this eternal presence is ever present, and it's here now, and it's already whole, perfect, and complete. It already is the fullness of God. We don't have to make that happen. It already exists. But it takes us humanly a long time to heal all those places in us that are separate from it, that are in pain, that are working through things, that are in fear, and that it's not like, oh, all I have to do is witness it and it's gone. It's just, this is part of the journey. And this takes us back to the Declaration of Independence. One of my favorite things that I've heard recently was by, I don't know if he came up with the idea, but that's who I heard it from, was from Simon Sinek. And once you hear it, you can't forget it. So what's the deal with the Declaration of Independence saying all men are created equal when 1/5 of the population was enslaved at the time? The writer of the Declaration of Independence was a massive slaveholder. What is the deal with how out of integrity that was? How can you say these high ideals when the founding fathers weren't even living it themselves? Women weren't equal, all these, all the civil rights and the issues that have been coming up, LGBTQI, all of them that are coming up now, none of that was recognized back then. How can we make that declaration? They were making the declaration from the colonial empire of Britain, but hadn't yet embodied it yet. And Simon Sinek pointed out, he said, isn't it interesting that what we celebrate is the Declaration of Independence, which happened in 1776, and not when the American Revolutionary War was won, which was 1783. So we weren't free yet. That war had not, it was, what was it? 7 more years before the war was even won, that declaration was made. The Constitution, which we don't talk about as much of when that was created, is what it was put into action in 1789, and George Washington, the first president, which was a totally new idea. 1789, we don't celebrate that. We celebrate the declaration, that calling forth of the highest ideal that these founding fathers and behind them the mothers came up with, these ideals long before they could embody it. And in fact, we are still growing into those declarations. That it wasn't meant to say, here's it, and we have arrived, and we have fulfilled it. Instead, it was calling forth these highest ideals of freedom, and then the pursuit of happiness he's talking about. Happiness, it's always a way of life. Happiness is something you're always growing into, so it's never an arrival. You're becoming. It's a constant state of becoming. So you have this declaration that's creating all people are created equal. We all have the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and we're still figuring out how to live that. We're still learning hundreds of years, so the freedom already exists, the ideal already exists, and we're growing into it all the time. And there's, in New Thought, Emma Curtis Hawkins was someone who believed in denial before affirmation, but the idea of denial is you have to let something go to create something for space to come in, for something new to come in. We had to win the Revolutionary War, which was incredibly violent, which was incredibly horrible. If anyone saw the Ken Burns documentary on the American Revolution, it's almost exhausting. You're just like, oh my gosh, another war, another battle, and it's just never ending, 7 years, just going and going. To even get the freedom from Britain to create the space so the Constitution can come in. When we make those declarations, it's not necessarily an easy road, and we know that what's happening today. It's not an easy road, but we're still living out the ideals. We still hold to those ideals. And so what we take from that personally is, what are you declaring for yourself? What are the highest ideals that you are declaring for your life, that if you were to say, this is what I declare, be a part of you, be like, that's not true. I'm not really living up to that yet. And that's good, because that declaration is just another way of saying, this is the vision. And a vision is something we're always growing into, we're always becoming. So as we're going forth into this week, declaring the independence, declaring our natural state of freedom, declaring our natural inalienable right to joy, to prosperity, to love, to creativity, to freedom, to all of it. How does this look in our life individually? I invite you to contemplate what you would declare if you were going to write your own declaration this week for your life, not just for the next year, not for the next 5 years. I mean, the highest ideal, the most purest, the most deep desire of your heart and soul. What is that? And then to write it and declare it as done now in the present tense, and knowing that you will continue to be growing into that declaration year after year after year. I don't do a declaration. I do a little different version. I do a covenant. And I've been doing it for years, and I do have different versions, but my covenant goes to the end of my life. There's no end point to my covenant, but it's at a certain date, and every year I return to it. And I like what Simon Sinek says, the declaration is the why. This is what matters to me. You can say it's the why or the what. It's my why. It's my why for my life. This is the thing that is the engine of why I'm doing it. The constitution is the how. How are we going to live our ideals? So for me in the covenant, I have my why, which is to the day I die. And then the spiritual practices that I do are the how I get to that why. And every year I relook at it. The why stays exactly the same because it reflects the depth, but the how might change year to year. Well, this works, this doesn't work, and I keep working at it. And I will be doing that till the day I die. So whether you call it a covenant, whether you call it a declaration, I like declaration. The reason why I like, because that's so strong. It's like when we declare something, it's not like maybe, I hope. It's like, I declare. There's such a power in, and we know the universe responds, right? That energy is responding to us, and we see it in our own country, that declaration, how things respond to, we keep coming back to it. So as we go forth into our 4th of July, and we had that extraordinary poem by Cher, which, by the way, what's the name of her poetry book? The Magician's Wife, Cher Wallard, and that poem is in that beautiful book. So you might want to ask her for a copy, buy a copy from her. But that idea, as we go into 4th of July, it's not that we're all the same. What comes forth is like this country can hold so many different perspectives, so much differences and opposites all under one thing. Because we've declared that we are all created equal. We've switched men to people, animals, all life form. We're all created equal. We are all have the inalienable rights to the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is something we can all collectively celebrate and give thanks. That we get to live in a place that made such a high declaration. We're so blessed. Because that is a glorious, life-transforming declaration of which we get to live under in all of our variety, in all of our different ways. And may you make it your own. May you find your own declaration that brings you to tears. And maybe you might just want to read it to a few people and have them be a witness to your great, grand, and glorious declaration. I declare. Let's pray. I declare that there is only one power, one presence, one light, one love. that is in, through, and as all creation, all the galaxies upon galaxies and billions of stars and every grain of sand and blade of grass. It is the entire creative universe and transcendent and beyond all of it. It is beyond all the multi-dimensions of time and space. It is free, unlimited, infinite, and eternal. It is absolute and unchanging. It is the place where we can stand on holy ground and know that we are forever free, we are forever loved, we are forever in peace, we are forever in joy, we are forever in that infinite joy of creativity, harmony, grace. That is who and what all life is, and that is who and what we are now and always. We see and feel the absolute nature of our very own being. This presence that never shifts, that is steady and stable. It is the lighthouse to the storm. It is the oasis in the desert. It is that steady presence that's at the center of our being, where there is no circumference. There is no limit. As we see and feel that steady presence in ourselves, we miraculously see that everywhere we turn, everywhere we see behind all appearances is this steady, absolute love, this presence of freedom that is fearless, that has no grasping energy because it already is everything. And it is us, it is me, it is you, it is this entire beautiful planet on which we live. And today we give a special blessing for this country, for the divine idea that animated this country and that is still healing from those native indigenous cultures which were trampled on to allow for this new idea to be birthed. We call forth healing and mutual respect. Reparations if needed and when needed for all the people that have been hurt along the way. Because this divine idea can hold it all. It can hold it all. There's no limit. It is for the highest good of all people, and we continue to stand and walk in that truth every day. We take up the call from Krishna to say, don't retreat. Move forward and do this healing work. Stand in the power of light and of love and of freedom and be that shining light everywhere you go, in every relationship, in every conversation. Be the light. Be the light. And when we be the light, we see the light, we are the light. And in that light, we are free. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Infinite and eternal light presence within us as all life. Thank you, God. Thank you, truth. Thank you, freedom. Thank you, alive energy of pure spirit awakens all of us. That is awakening as all of us, here, now, and forever. In deep abiding gratitude, we let this word be now, as I invite you now to join me in saying, and so it is. Amen and amen.
I walk in God in all